Chapter 542, Yesterday's Old Department. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. It took Zhang Yuochen 15 minutes to annihilate the last 4 humanoid fishes. Huang Yanjun dashed forward and joined Zhang Yuochen to collect the scales, feathers, beast tendons, and the fire spirit beads of the humanoid fishes. It is no surprise that you are number 1 heaven board. Witnessing you defeat 7 humanoid fishes made me realize that you truly are admirable. It was a voice of an old man that sounded out from of the mist. Huang Yanjun turned to the direction of the voice and asked, "Who is that?" Huo Wuji and Huo Guang walked out from the fog. Both of them were Fish Dragon Realm monks. They are capable of communicating with heaven and earth spiritual chi with their internal chi, which allowed them to have feather-light bodies and the capability of standing on water without using any martial technique. "So it's you," said Huang Yanjun. Zhang Yuochen was calm and composed as if he had known all along that Huo Wuji and Huo Guang were hiding in the dark. He winked at Huang Yanjun, letting her know that she should continue collecting treasures from the dead humanoid fishes. "Stop." Huo Guang glared at Huang Yanjun and reprimanded her. "The treasures found on the 7 humanoid fishes belong to us now." Huang Yanjun felt anger rising in her and was about to summon the holy sword to slaughter Huo Guang. Zhang Yuochen stopped Huang Yanjun. He turned to Huo Guang and said, "That's against the rules. I was the one who killed the humanoid fishes. Why should I let you take the treasures?" Huo Guang laughed and said, "Simply because we are stronger than you." Zhang Yuochen held himself back from laughing out loud. He said, "If I'm not wrong, you have only achieved the 3rd change in the Fish Dragon Realm. Believe it or not, if I can kill 7 humanoid fishes, I can also kill you." Ha ha. Huo Guang gave a laugh, but he turned somber and said, "What good is it for you to continue putting up an act? Don't think that I don't know that you have exhausted all of your genuine chi. What's left of you is an empty shell. I could knock you down with a single punch." Huo Guang stared intently at Zhang Yuochen, hoping to catch a hint of the panic in his expression. To his disappointment, Zhang Yuochen appeared rather calm and composed. He nodded and said, "You're right. The genuine chi in me had been exhausted from the battle." Huo Guang said, "In that case, hand over the treasures you are carrying to us and reveal the secret of the space power to me. Perhaps I will grant you an easy death." What an arrogant fellow. Huang Yanjun could not hold back anymore. She garnered a strong wind power which rushed out of her body to form a 10 meters long shadow dragon. Roar. The sound of the wind turned into a dragon's roar. Displaying her skills of the shadow of the royal wind dragon, Huang Yanjun dashed forward and thrust her sword towards Huo Guang. The sword hit Huo Guang in between his eyebrows. Huo Guang's expression changed slightly, and he struck out the silver bone bow to defend himself against Huang Yanjun's sword. However, the moment it touched the sword's edge, the silver bone bow broke into pieces. Holy sword. Huo Guang's expression changed slightly, and he struck out the silver bone bow to defend himself against Huang Yanjun's sword. Since when did a weapon like the holy sword become so ubiquitous? He was terrified and kept retreating. Seeing that Huang Yanjun was about to pierce her sword into Huo Guang's forehead, Huo Wuji, who was standing behind, bellowed, "How dare you! How dare you!" Huo Wuji only blurted 2 words, but those words turned into a series of echoes. Each sound he made overlapped with one another, and together they condensed into a human-shaped sound wave. The human-shaped sound wave was translucent. It quickly dashed towards Huang Yuochen and punched him. Huo Wuji used an inferior class ghost-level sound wave martial technique, known as the Scream of Death. This martial technique can transform the human voice into sound waves that can manifest itself as various forms. The most basic form was to condense sound waves into a human form. Bang! As Huang Yanjun blocked the attack, she collided with the human-shaped shadow of sound waves. The impact of the strong force caused her to fall behind Zhang Yuochen. Huo Wuji looked surprised as he sized up Huang Yanjun and said, "You surprised me by having a high level of cultivation at such a young age. However, you still won't be able to match my power. Run for your life so you may still live." "Really? I don't think so." Huang Yanjun refused to admit defeat. She lifted her combat sword and attacked again. "Senior Sister Apprentice Yanjun, please go collect the treasures from the bodies of the humanoid fish while I deal with them." said Zhang Yuochen. Huang Yanshan was aware that Zhang Yuochen was powerful enough to crush Huo Wuji and Huo Gwen easily. So Huang Yanshan put down her holy sword, stared coldly at the two evil cultivators across her and said to Zhang Yuochen with a low voice, "Be careful, those two are very powerful." Zhang Yuochen nodded his head. Huo Wuji frowned and coldly said, "Zhang Yuochen, even at your prime, you may not be able to stand up to me. You have already exhausted a great amount of genuine qi. Don't you think you are overconfident?" Zhang Yuochen smiled, held out a hand, and made a gesture of invitation. He said, "If I win, I was confident; if I lose, then I was conceited." Don't tell me he still has some remarkable trump card. A bad feeling arose inside Huo Wuji. Naturally, having lived for over 100 years, an elder like him did not get easily intimidated by Zhang Yuochen. Huo Wuji lifted his arms and held them in front of his chest. He garnered genuine qi from within his body and focused it at his abdomen before he let out the scream of death again. Kill. He opened his mouth and let out another murderous sound wave. The sound wave condensed to form an armored 7-meter-tall warrior. He carried a magical hooked knife in his hand and dashed towards Zhang Yuochen while screaming. At the back of the sound wave warrior, the sea water tossed and turned as it moved forward in waves. Zhang Yuochen stood on the surface of the water, his white robe flapping noisily from the strong wind. Despite that, his expression remained as calm as a millpond. Swoosh! With a wave of his hand, his lightning knife flew out and shattered the sound wave warrior into pieces. Zhang Yuochen dashed forward to face Huo Wuji. He struck again with his lightning knife. Huo Wuji crossed his arms over his chest to block the attack. Poof! The lightning knife went through Huo Wuji's celestial body shield and struck his arms, sending him flying through the air. Huo Wuji fell and landed 33 meters away. His hands were smoldering, having been charred by the heat of the thunderbolt. More seriously, the lightning knife left a deep wound on his wrists that they were almost detached from the hand. Whoosh! Another lightning knife flew towards Huo Wuji and was about to hit his neck. Huo Wuji swiftly dodged by bending his knees. He said with a trembling voice, "I admit defeat." Under Zhang Yuochen's command, the lightning knife stopped and hovered above Huo Wuji, sparkling with a purple glow. Huo Gui, who was standing on the side, witnessed how his grandfather bowed in defeat after merely 3 moves from Zhang Yuochen. He was terrified and hurriedly kneeled down, hoping Zhang Yuochen would spare his life. Even his grandfather was no match for Zhang Yuochen. He would definitely not be able to stand up to Zhang Yuochen. Zhang Yuochen said, "Why are you admitting defeat so quickly?" Huo Wuji took a deep breath and hideously smiled. He said, "You are a master of spiritual power. I am not ashamed to have fallen into your hands. You may do whatever you like with me." Huo Gui finally realized what was going on. Zhang Yuochen was not only a great martial arts monk but also a great master of spiritual power. Even if Zhang Yuochen's genuine qi gets depleted, he could still kill them using his spiritual power. "I won't kill you, neither will I let you off." As Zhang Yuochen released his grip, the lightning sword transformed into tiny sparks that eventually dissipated. Huo Wuji looked up and said, "What do you mean?" Zhang Yuochen said, "Both of you have a reasonable level of capability. Why don't you go into the scroll world and help me build cities and caves?" Zhang Yuochen did not give them much time to consider their options and sent them directly into the scroll world. He handed them over to Blackie to be slaves in the scroll world. Anyone who enters into the scroll world would not be able to revolt, even if he were a master of the Fish Dragon realm. The Orange Star Emissary beat the Iron Lady and obtained the auspicious vase. He flew back to return it to Zhang Yuochen and said, "Sir, Huo Wuji and Huo Gui are useless trash. To keep them under your wings would be wasting spiritual qi in the scroll world." As Zhang Yuochen took over the bottle, he smiled and said, "Not all black market evil warriors are evil. Even though the Saint Huo Villa is now obsolete, Huo Wuji and Huo Gui were once disciples of Saint Huo Villa. However, as far as I know, a great saint was once born from Saint Huo Villa." The Orange Star Emissary was a little surprised that Zhang Yuochen was aware of the Saint Huo Villa. She said, "Sir, are you referring to Huo Qingyuan, the previous manager of Saint Huo Villa?" Zhang Yuochen nodded and said, "Huo Qingyuan, also known as Saint King Qingyuan, was a powerful commander who served Emperor Ming. He followed Emperor Ming, fought countless battles, and conquered many lands. Unfortunately, after the collapse of the Sacred Central Empire, Saint Huovilla was implicated. Under the siege of the imperial court army, many of its top masters were annihilated and wounded. They had no other choice but to escape by joining the black market. Since Huo Qinyuan was the predecessor of Huo Wuji and Huang Guang, I will spare their lives. When he was reborn 800 years later, Zhang Yuochen read many history books and learned about the fate of Saint Huovilla. Orange Star Emissary had a sudden realization. Her expression changed drastically and said, "As far as I know, 800 years ago, Mingdi, one of the 9 emperors, had an only son whose name was also Zhang Yuochen. You and he,